Welcome everyone to the Maple Minds podcast. And today we're going to be speaking about the King's Speech as well as UNDRIP. My name is Paddling My Own Canoe. You can call me Mo, and I am located on the unceded territories of the Lekwanga speaking people, the Sanghees, and the Esquimalt Nation. And Calvin, please introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Calvin Stevens. I come from the unceded Mi'kmaq territory of Nova Scotia.
Smarty?
Hello, I'm Smarsh, and I come from territory of Alberta, and we are on Treaty 7, 6, and 8.
And Miss Lotus Lady.
Hi, I'm Sherry, and I live on the unceded territory of the Esquimalt, or the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. Sorry.
And our fearless leader, Maple.
I'm on the unceded territories of the Esquimalt nations.
Thank you all for joining. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share. So, as we all know, we have a new government. We had a throne speech this week from the King, which was making history. We have a little clip that we're going to show, and then we'll get into it.
There's no sound.
Yeah,
There's no sound.
There's no sound.
No.
TikTok, can you hear the sound?
I don't think so. No.
No.
we apologize for the technical difficulty. So, we will just talk about the speech.
Sorry.
That's okay. So this is a throne speech like none other. For myself, I have never, ever seen in the House of Commons while they were on the Senate floor so much information or so much, shall I say, wanting to work with First Nations. It seemed genuine, and we'll see what the road holds ahead. King Charles mentioned that he is still doing his reconciliation work. So that was important. He also did a one-on-one meeting with the Assembly of First Nations chief, Cindy Woodworth Nepanak. And that says a lot, shows that he is willing to listen to us. They also acknowledged that we are treaty people. Mm-hmm. Calvin, you want to give us your thoughts?
Oh God, where do I start? Is it possible to bring up the king, a visual image of the king on the throne speech? While you're doing that, I'll talk about it. So, the king's speech, the monarch hasn't been here in Canada since shortly after World War II, which was his mother. That should signify the significance of this moment. Shortly after World War II, Queen Elizabeth came down and did her speech. At that time, the country had just suffered one of the greatest conflicts of mankind, and it was still fresh. And sovereignty, self-determination was on the forefront of every nation within this world. And to have a monarch come and speak at this time shows the gravity of how lucky we came to saving our sovereignty. Because as we all know, if Pierre Poilievre would have came in, he would have handed this country over along with Daniel Smith to the United States and we would have been in the same boat as the Americans right now. Mark Carney does not hide in it. The King's not hiding it, and they don't even have to name what the threat is anymore. It's the United States. They want this country, and they want it bad. And that whole speech was about we are leaving Canada. We are leaving the United States behind. The United States can't be a trusted partner anymore. They can't be trusted for stability. They can't be trusted for military might, and they can't be trusted for the economy. And this whole speech was exactly that. He talked about sovereignty. He talked about military might. He talked about supercharging this economy. So we are the new leaders in the new world. And he talked about ideology. That was a little slap in the face to Donald Trump, where the Christian nationalist movement is taking over. We are a country of different people, of immigrants, of indigenous people, and that's an ideology we hold true. And he talked briefly about respecting indigenous rights. He said there was a statement there. I hope that it's not just saying it, but also in action too. So he's also reiterating that provinces and the federal government need to do consultation work with First Nations and don't use just pretty words, actually do some action with it. So, this speech was uh very powerful, very meaningful, and it's setting the stage, and it's letting the world know that Canada is going to be the next superpower and the world leader. So if you're an investor out there, you might want to invest in some Canadian companies.
Hello. Yeah, I think it was very progressive. I think King Charles did a good speech, but as Calvin just said, it should be put to forefront now. It should be not just words, it should be words that are put into action. Because now they've said what they now King Charles saying what he said, he does have to go to putting it into an action plan because actions speak a lot louder than just words. And I'm hesitant, but within good reason. So that's my thoughts on the King's speech. As long as he keeps true to his words, we will have no problem. But again, a dignitary sitting there talking about, oh, we're on Indigenous land, we're here with the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit, is all good, but it's not good if it's just pretty words and wrapped up in a bow. That's
Yeah,
all I have to say about that.
I think. Can I have a chance to comment on that?
Go ahead.
You're absolutely right. For generations and generations, we have been denied our sovereignty and our rights as a nation as Indigenous people. But in the next 4 years, there's going to be massive, massive projects for national security and defense and economy here. And so I'm hoping that the federal government does not want any hiccups. So it's going to abide by consultation and working with indigenous people before. I know provinces has not been doing that. I know especially conservative provinces like Alberta and Nova Scotia, and that leaves a bad taste in indigenous people's mouth. Like we don't trust the government because they've historically has never worked out in our favor. But I think this is a make it or break it moment. It's go time. It's basically we got to do this or we're gone. Our sovereignty is gone. Our country is gone. So I think Mark Carney and his cabinet is going to do everything possible uh, to ensure that Indigenous people are included. And I think that is the biggest reason why that Indigenous. I think the province leaders are meeting with Mark Carney. I think Mark Carney is going to sit them down and going to tell them, "Hey, look, you need to stop the bullshit. You got to stop doing projects without Indigenous people's consultation and how do you say what's the word where you condone something or like go ahead with it? I English isn't my
Consent?
first language. Yeah,
Is it
consent.
consent?
Yeah, yeah.
We are going to get into this in a little bit more in detail, but Miss Lotus Lady, I'd like to hear your thoughts.
On the throne speech?
Yes, please.
I was actually pleasantly surprised at the focus on the relations between Indigenous and the Crown. I was not expecting that. It was really nice to see how many Indigenous people were in the audience in their traditional regalia. It felt like a new era of real truth and reconciliation. Like it felt like we were making a move forward, that we weren't just giving it lip service, that it was actually playing out in real time. And I knew that King Charles was had more progressive ideas, but I didn't realize that I wouldn't say impressed, but I was glad to see that he actually is taking this seriously, to go to the point where they're actually adding in specifically to mention it, tells me that there's commitment there that maybe wasn't there before, or maybe they didn't understand the gravitas of the situation before. And it feels like it's to me, I mean, my voice in this conversation doesn't matter that much, but to me, it looked like and sounded like moving in the right direction. Oh, can't hear you.
Mabel, do you want to weigh in on this as well?
Yeah, I have never seen a monarch mention in a throne speech Indigenous peoples, and he did. He mentioned, I can't remember his exact words, but he did mention he did mention the relationship, but I can't remember the exact words.
There are several points he mentioned. That he mentioned that we are standing, and it was that particular tribe. We are standing, I think. Yeah, on their unceded territory. And he also mentioned, I think it was consultation or the UNDRIP, or I don't know what he mentioned, but he said, and that's the thing that stuck out to me. He said, hopefully that moving forward, this isn't only about words, but also it's about action. Not in the exact words, but it was that basically. He was the words were very meaningful.
So now we're going to get into a little bit of UNDRIP, because the national chief is concerned when she is looking at what's happening in our provinces, and we're going to look at the actual acts in UNDRIP that speak about consultation and what true consultation is. So hopefully we won't have any more technical difficulty, and we can show some slides.
We can show slides. Yeah, there's no sound to slides.
So this is the UNDRIP Act. Would somebody like to read it?
Oh, I can't even see it.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I do this from my phone, and I even have my reading glasses on, and I'm standing way far from my phone, and it's too small. I'm sorry.
Don't apologize. Go ahead.
I can read it. The UNDRIP Act on July 21st, 2021, the United Nations Declaration of Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act received royal assessment and came into force in Canada. This act requires that by June 21st, 2023, the federal government, in consultation with First Nation, develop a 10-year plan to implement the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. The goal of this plan is to make all federal laws consistent with UNDRIP. The Anishinaabe Nation Legal Department will be making submissions to Canada regarding the development of the 10-year UNDRIP action plan, which can be very helpful to bring greater equality to First Nations and Canadian relationships.
So in that point, they do have an action plan. It is out. But what is lacking is there's no dates set and no measurables in that action plan. And I'm going to open up for comments from whoever would like to speak first.
I'll speak on this. Um, oh God. Okay. So yeah, it does talk about the relationship between the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit in this act, but the measurables, I don't understand why the measurables are not there. That's the confusing part to me. And we can look at this and say, oh, it's a good thing, it's this and this and this, but to dissolve one act to put another act, it affects us greatly. It affects us in so many ways that people aren't going to understand. You can't have one legislation go through get rid of another act that's been in play since 1985, and it's like just putting fancy words saying, yeah, we're gonna have a relationship with the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit, but not giving us what relationship and what you're going to do to make it better for us is really troublesome for me. Thank you.
So just to clarify with the people that are listening in, when we mean by measurables, we mean by certain timelines have to be met and certain outcomes have to be reached. The way the action plan for Canada for UNDRIP is worded and laid out, it doesn't give provinces timelines. It doesn't give provinces a certain measurable outcome they have to meet before a certain date. It's basically a very generic piece of action plan legislation, and it's really asking provinces to do it on a volunteer basis and to do it on their own time frame. What would have been really helpful is if the action plan was drafted where there was some teeth to it. As it stands right now, there's no teeth. There's no disciplinary action to the provinces if they fail to meet any of the UNDRIP action plan. So one of the sections in the action plan says that it's to review all legislation under the criminal code to make sure that it's consistent with the UNDRIP Act. But there's no set time frame to do so. And what happens if you get to 2028 and the time to review all what has each province has done comes to play, and then the province can come to the table and said, "Hey, look, we tried, but we didn't get anywhere." So, what are the consequences? Like, we're essentially running on the honor system and merit basis. And we know that provincial governments switch from left to right, left to right. They go from conservative to liberal. So really, people will tell you politics has short-term corporate memory. So what's to say if this liberal government here wants to develop an action plan and actually try to follow the action plan of Canada for UNDRIP, and let's say a new government comes in and scraps it and says, "Oh, we're not doing that. We got no time for that." Like, there's nothing that is in the action plan that's going to require the provinces to stay on track, to stay focused on this legislation.
You're muted. Sorry.
Me?
I'm
No.
being you today, Maple.
Yes, that's usually me.
Miss Lotus Lady. Would you like to comment? Any thoughts? Any questions?
She's muted too.
Okay.
Right from the beginning, I thought that, like Calvin was saying, that there wasn't enough structure. and not enough requirements that need to be met by provinces. Like we know that there are provinces who do not support Truth and Reconciliation Day, right? Like they don't support that, and that because it's up to them whether, because they've left it up to the provinces whether they'll honor that or not. For instance, we're talking about our next door neighbors, right? You know, the province next door, they don't. So I hear what you're saying. I just wonder how that would work with the Constitution, and maybe it's a constitutional thing that the federal government couldn't um, uh, impose this on the provinces. I don't know, because I'm not a lawyer and I don't know constitutional law or Indigenous law. Like I don't know what the federal government would be able to impose on the provinces in order to make them enact this legislation, unless they put it just as federal legislation that would and remove the provincial part, the provincial level to it, and everybody has to abide by federal legislation. But I don't know if they can do that either. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
I know exactly what you mean. This is a federal legislation, but the
Mhm.
1982 Constitution gives each province its autonomy.
Yeah.
So I know where you're coming from. It, what and if can the federal government, how can they punish the province when
Yeah.
they're an independent entity that
Yeah.
is still part of Canada
Yeah.
dealing with a federal legislation?
Yeah.
That totally makes sense. And I don't know. I don't know if they can do anything. I don't know if they can withhold equalization payments. I don't know. Like that would be
Mhm.
dependent on exactly what you said, a
Mhm.
constitutional scholar.
Mhm.
There is a question.
Mhm.
Absorbed One on TikTok is asking, what act would UNDRIP dissolve?
The Indian Act, the most racial document in the history of this country. And actually, one thing we exported was apartheid. Apartheid used the Indian Act.
Mhm.
Absorbed One has another question. She's wondering how they can dissolve the Indian Act.
Well, they would have to work with all uh, Indigenous people across Canada to help develop a new act that is for us by us, instead of
Mhm.
having it other way around, having it developed by somebody that's not us for us. So this will be more of an Indigenous role uh, for developing a new act, according to UNDRIP.
Can you bring up the next slide?
Sure can.
I can read that if you want, Mo.
Please go ahead.
Where does UNDRIP stand in law? UNDRIP is not protected by the Constitution of Canada. They are not protected by Section 35. They are not same as treaty rights, they are something less. Its terms articles are not legislated federally. UNDRIP legislation requires UNDRIP consideration so laws are consistent. Not one article of UNDRIP is proposed to be federally legislated. The UN says it has the status of a universal international human rights instrument. In Canada, human rights legislation is considered quasi-constitutional in nature. They take precedence and priority over other general, that is, non-constitutional statutes, but not the Constitution. Accommodation to the point of undue hardship.
So UNDRIP, what section that it would fall? It would fall, I believe, under the 1982 Constitution, because the 1982 Constitution states that First Nations rights are recognized in their treaties. So, to give you a little background, Mi'kmaq people and a lot of First Nations across Canada have been fighting for our rights for so long, and that's why there's a lot of distrust between First Nations and the federal and provincial governments. Back in 1970, here just in Nova Scotia, the chiefs and regular Mi'kmaq citizens formed a Union of Nova Scotia Indians, which was designed to take the provincial government to court and the federal government to fight for recognition of our rights. Shortly after that, in 1980, a community member here in Eskasoni went to the United Nations to have our treaties recognized, and they were. Then we have the Constitution Act of 1982, which also recognized our treaty rights. So even to this day, in 2025, we're still fighting for our rights, and we're still fighting for the recognition of our rights. So this is why a lot of First Nations are very distrustful of the provincial and federal government, and the federal and provincial governments have to step up and stop the bullshit that they're doing. Before Mark Carney came in, Alberta, Nova Scotia, and other conservative controlled provinces were pushing ahead with projects for American controlled companies, because a lot of these provincial controlled governments are directly working with American corporations to sell each province out. The biggest one is Alberta. I mean, my God, Daniel Smith flies more times to Mar-a-Lago than to the grocery store. So with that being said, the provinces have never historically treated First Nations correctly, especially when they're conservative governments. So when Mark Carney meets all the premiers and tells them, I can only assume what he's going to tell them. He's going to have to tell them, look, you guys are all independent, but you need to cut your bullshit, treat Indigenous people with respect, listen to them. This is their land, and we need to do this, and we need to do this fast. And if we work together, things will get done. If we don't work together, we are all screwed. And the next 4 years is all about infrastructure, national defense, economy. Basically, we are going to surpass the United States, both in military and economic.
It's one point I want to bring up that people might not understand. In regards to the Indian Act, it does not cover Inuit or Métis people. It is only for First Nations people, where UNDRIP covers every Indigenous person, regardless if you're a Métis, Inuit, or First Nations.
The biggest thing, the Métis and Inuit have to be, they're essential. They are essential in the future, because it is projected that the oil reserves all around the world, both in the United States and Saudi Arabia, everywhere, they are going to dry up within the next 50 years. This is the biggest reason why the United States wants Canada and Greenland, because of our large oil reserves in the Arctic. They have more oil reserves in the Arctic than anywhere else in the country, and it'll last another 100 decades. So with that being said, in the Métis and the Inuit are caretakers of that land. So they have to give these people respect and include them into this process.
Smarshy, do you have some comments?
I believe Calvin is right. We all, as Indigenous people, Métis, Inuit, and First Nations, we all have to be included, because it's not just one nation, it's every nation across Canada. And I agree that Alberta is doing everything it can to not work or not follow the fiduciary obligation they have to First Nations, Métis, and Inuit in Alberta. And that is so frustrating to me as being a Métis person, because I am just as much Indigenous as anyone else that's Indigenous. It shouldn't be one group for one, and that's frustrating to me. But I get why the legislation was written by the way it was written, and I think I'm pro UNDRIP, but I'm also scared for that UNDRIP doesn't come with then that doesn't encompass all of us. That's what I'm scared of.
Welcome. We have another guest joining. Would you please introduce yourself?
I've been listening, and when my
Good.
Wi-Fi wasn't kicking me out, I'm hoping that it doesn't kick me out with my camera on. But I'm sorry I wasn't able to have my camera or mic on. I was still talking. Nobody was hearing with my mic off. But yeah, I've been paying attention. I just haven't been able to show you me yet.
Then, Christy, you want to give us some of your thoughts and feelings about the topics that we've covered so far?
That you've heard.
Well,
Yeah, that you've
I
heard
heard you
so far.
ask Sherry about the King's visit, and I was giving my feedback too, again with my mic off. I sorry, am I freezing? I'm sorry, my Wi-Fi is not good.
No, you're good.
So I reserved my thoughts until I jumped onto the internet first to see what the reaction from the Indigenous community was. Because my initial feeling was positive. I think it was positive that he recognized the territory and sorry that it was an unceded territory. And I think that if you would take a time machine back to like even the 90s or even the early 2000s and said that a king was going to do that or any monarch was going to do that, I think I would have bet heavily against it. So I think that it felt like a step in the right direction. However, I wasn't ready to put my foot down on that step until I saw a positive reaction from the Indigenous community. I also saw the other side of it too. I saw some Indigenous community members protesting against it, like the visit in general and against him. But overall, and it could be my algorithm, I experienced more positive feedback than negative. So I was confidently giving it a thumbs up.
Yeah.
Now,
I did.
Sorry.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
No, please. I have other thoughts too, and I don't want to keep running away until you have a chance to address that one.
No, I did see a lot of Indigenous people protested, and that really discouraged me. We are holding on to hate. We are holding on to anger. And yes, the British Crown did treat Indigenous people very poorly. But a person once told me, if you hold on to anger, if you hold on to if you hold on to fear, if you hold on to anger, and if you don't forgive, you are going to be stuck in that moment for the rest of your life, and it's going to prevent you from moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a concept we as Indigenous people always practice forgiveness.
Yeah.
But
Mm-hmm.
the taste of the history of Indigenous people is so atrocious. How do we get that taste out of our mouth? And how do we bridge the gap and truly move into the future through reconciliation when there has been so much done to us?
So I don't
to
pretend to know the answer to that, but I will recognize how strongly the people who benefit from the hate and the rage and the fear, how strongly they recruit and how strongly they are consistently marketing their message to ensure that the fires of hate and fear keep burning. So I think that the more people talking about it and confronting those messages within, and I'm talking about white people, within our community, when people are trying to recruit within our community, I think it's our job to speak against that marketing that leads into the fear and the rage and the anger. I think that education is very important about it. I think this is really good, getting everybody to understand why there is UNDRIP, what is UNDRIP, the differences between UNDRIP and the Indian Act, understanding the Indian Act. I think the more that all of society understands the details, I think that it sharpens their bullshit detector for when the recruiters come.
Yeah. I
But tell
think
me if you
moving
disagree.
I think
If
moving forward after Mark Carney meets these provincial leaders, it's going to change. It's really going to I feel anyways, because I said we have to move at lightning speeds to secure the sovereignty of this country. And if we all work together, we can get there faster. And I think Mark Carney realizes that, and he's going to have a little talking to all the premiers, I think.
I wish my camera was on when you were going through that, because it was like I was at a rock concert. I was nodding so much. This is what I'm telling you. Especially today, did you guys see the announcement of his new chief of staff?
Yes.
Okay.
No.
So it's a gentleman who is has been recognized as his work as a lawyer. He's also been recognized by the UN. He's a permanent. I'm going to mess it up. I don't want to quote it. I'm going to do a video about him later too. But he's also been recognized for what he has done to advance gender inclusion, gender diversity and inclusion of other communities. And when I saw his track record, I thought about, when Calvin was describing hey, this is what's going to happen. No more BS business going forward, because we got a big job ahead of us. When I read about this guy and his credentials, I thought it was the perfect complement to the style that I kind of want to see at a Carney like that.
Well, one thing that has come up is Assembly of First Nations Chiefs, Cindy Woodworth Nepanak, has asked Carney to be at the table at the premier's meeting, but he's been silenced for some reason. So I'm just going to read a quote from her. First Nations want to move forward, but you can't do that without having those voices at the table and thinking we know what's best, said Cindy Woodhouse Nepanak. That hasn't worked for 150 years. It's not going to work for the next 150 years. So let's get down to business. And I think it's empowering that she's gone to the government.
May I ask, are they asking to be part of just this initial meeting, or do they want to be part of the premier's meetings going forward?
I think it's forward.
Pardon?
No, I know she definitely wanted to be at this one, because in this meeting, they are going to be talking about fast tracking projects.
Yeah.
And they need to have Indigenous consultation. And the provinces, 3 of the provinces, have been talking out of their mouth, saying they're going to have consultations with us, but have not.
So I noticed today that Mr. I want to look like an overachiever, Doug Ford, had struck a deal with some other provinces ahead of the premier's meeting. Do you believe that, I don't know the details of this, honestly, I'm asking, did he do those agreements? Are they agreements that Indigenous leaders would have wanted to have a say in, and did he do it behind their back, or did he include them all, or is it a redundant question because this isn't the kind of decision that they want to be involved in? Do you know? I honestly don't know. I'm asking.
All the projects that the provincial governments are doing right now, what Doug Ford is doing right now, what Tim Hewson is doing right now, and what Daniel Smith is doing right now, these are all projects that have been in the books for a couple years now, and it's not to benefit the national security of this country. It's to benefit large American corporations.
Right.
So,
I think I misunderstood, because or I misspoke and I introduced something that wasn't relevant, because you're talking about projects like energy projects like building corridors and such. And I believe that, and I don't know, I should have looked into it more before I brought it up, but I believe that the agreement that Doug Ford was talking about was a trade agreement.
Yeah,
like
it's,
provincial trade barriers. Sorry, pardon me. And that was my question. Is that because that is between premiers as well, right? So is that something that they're asking to be a part of as well?
Actually, it's
Because it
both.
likely, sorry.
It is both. They want to be part of opening the provinces without trade barriers, and also definitely when it comes to energy corridors and mining.
Don't
Absolutely.
so
correct me if I'm wrong. Don't they have a fiduciary responsibility to have the Indigenous
Yep.
community at the table
Yep.
before they write the legislation? Don't they have a duty to consult before they write up and make the proposal and the plan? I
yeah,
think
Absolutely.
they do, don't they?
they
Yeah.
do.
Absolutely. They have a fiduciary obligation to consult Indigenous people. And for time and time again, what they do is they give chiefs and council a time. And
Mm-hmm.
then within that time, I mean, if the chief and council haven't prepared, they're like, oh, well, we did give them a certain time, but they only give us a week, right? They only give council a week to step in and be like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, this is the project, but they don't give us longer than a week. And if we been able to, if the chief and council haven't been able to come up to an agreement, they go ahead because they say, well, no, we did the fiduciary responsibility to consult,
Right.
but they
But
didn't do it
now,
correctly.
sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but I'm just trying to understand, because federal and provincial are different, right? And each province is handling things very differently. There's some provinces who are trying but maybe missing the mark. There's other provinces that absolutely have no interest in repairing that relationship, and all they do is talk about repairing that relationship. And then there's some provinces that are kind of in between those two dichotomies, right? Like I see a couple of provinces trying to make things and maybe stumbling and falling while they're trying to do that. I
Right.
see other provinces who are just not interested at all. So I'm just wondering, are you talking like at a federal level or a provincial
No,
level?
I'm talking at a provincial level. So,
Right.
like, because I only understand the provincial level, I don't understand the federal level, and it's
Hmm.
the thing is, the provincial government of Alberta is trying to quote unquote say they've done the
Yeah.
fiduciary obligation, and they're not, right?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
the obligation is supposed to put us at the table for
Right.
consultation, but they're only giving the chief and council so much time to respond,
Right.
but they're not giving us the exact time that they had to come up
Yeah.
with this plan of development. And that's
Right.
where it falls short on the province, because they're like, no, 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 we consulted,
Mm-hmm.
but
Mo,
we didn't.
Can we
Mo.
bring up the next two slides? Take them up. I'm going to read both of them quickly so we can get back into this discussion because we're
Mm-hmm.
getting short on time. Sorry,
Yes.
guys.
No, absolutely.
Bear with me.
That's
Sorry.
that's okay.
So, Article 18. Indigenous people have the right to participate in decision making in matters that would affect their rights through representation chosen by themselves in accordance with their own procedures, as well as to maintain and develop their own Indigenous decision making institutions. And let's go on to the next, Article 24. Indigenous people have the right to, oh, sorry, not 24. Articles 26.2. Indigenous people have the right to own, use, develop, and control the lands, territories, and resources that they've possessed by reason of traditional ownership or other traditional occupations for use, as well as those who they have otherwise required. So, what's happening right now in the concern is there's a distinction between consent and consultation.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the governments are failing. They're basically thinking that, okay, we meet, we talk, it's a consultation, that they pass laws based on that one meeting without having consent. And that's what's happening here in British Columbia. Bill 15 is already hurt some Indigenous communities because the government pushed it through without consultations, without consent, and they fast-tracked some mining permits in the province without consulting the traditional chiefs and leaders in those territories. So this is a bit disingenuous if they're just going to give us words and no action.
May I
I-
ask a question?
May I speak?
Mhm.
Okay. We see a lot of that happening, and we've seen it happen for 10, 15, 20 years. So in my province, Nova Scotia, Tim Houston was doing the exact same thing. He's pushing to mine uranium, and he's fast tracking it, and he's not consulting with my people. These are all projects that individual provinces was doing on their own
Mhm.
for their own province. I think the difference is with a national agenda that Mark Carney and his cabinet is going to implement is going to be much different than the provincial agendas.
Mm.
And I think this is the biggest reason why the national chief isn't invited to the first meeting. So if you want to scold your team to smarten the F up,
Mhm.
you wouldn't want somebody in the room. So I think this is one of the reasons why she's not invited right now. He's got to talk to his team and say, look, the disrespect you have been doing in the past has to
Mhm.
stop. The
Mhm.
non-consultation and pushing things through has to
Mhm.
stop, because First
Mhm.
Nations do have a legal obligation and a responsibility and can take us to court and slow things down. And right now, in the
Mhm.
next 4 years, this country cannot afford that. Another reason is maybe a security reason, because uh, the, the national chief is not part of a provincial set government agency. So having her there would probably distract from the mission itself.
Mm.
I
I
just
just had, sorry,
go ahead. No, go ahead.
I just have a quick question for you, actually, Mo. Is
Okay.
it specifically the traditional chiefs, or are we talking about the elected chiefs as well?
Elected chiefs and of course hereditary chiefs.
Right. Okay.
Where
So when
there's
you say traditional chiefs, you mean all of them, right? The elected
yes,
and
yeah.
the okay. Because I thought there was a difference between the two, so I just wanted to clarify that for myself. Thank you.
There is, and it depends what nation you're from.
Right. Okay.
Let's talk about Bill 15 for a little bit
Mhm.
here. Bill 15, the Infrastructure Project Act, was introduced in the legislation May 1st
Mhm.
with the aim of speeding up approvals for large developments in British Columbia, eliminating the unnecessary cost delays.
Mhm.
But not only First Nations, but municipalities across BC see Bill 15 as a threat to their decision-making authority, as the legislation gives EB's cabinet extraordinary powers to override local regulations stated by the Union of the BC Municipalities. And they pushed this through just a couple of days ago before they broke for summer holidays
Mhm.
or summer break. And many of our BC chiefs are taking him to task. In fact, we've had some that were supposed to go to Asia with him, and they refused. They said, if he's going to break his contract, they don't want to walk with him. They don't want to stand with him. And he has to remember who elected him.
Mhm.
This last election, there was a push to get every Indigenous voice, and I'm talking provincially and federally,
Mhm.
in BC, so we wouldn't get a conservative government.
Mhm.
It's frustrating.
Mhm.
It is. And I just did a TikTok, was it yesterday or the other day? Um, at the gravity of the situation for Canada.
Mhm.
Basically, this entire country is under threat. And Mark Carney has said it, the King has said it, everyone is saying, all the TikTok influencers have been saying it for months. So, with that being said, there's going to be some times where I don't want to say it, that consultation has to take a back seat to push through some critical infrastructure projects such as national defense, such as power and energy.
Mhm.
So basically, people, all Indigenous people across Canada have to realize, yes, we want to be involved and we're going to be consulted whenever there's an opportunity to do so. But there's some projects that are going to have to be taken into lightning speed to shore up the sovereignty and the defense of this country, that there's going to be no time to waste. And it's those projects that are going to upset people the most. But you know what? It's those projects that are going to protect them, that is going to protect our treaties, that is going to protect this country's sovereignty and protect every Canadian within its borders. And with that being said, I would totally understand if it meant protecting my children, my people, and my culture. Then yeah, sometimes things are going to have to be skipped. I personally believe that this is a very critical time in history for Canada.
But Calvin, at what expense do we do that? Because here in BC, EB is going to put these projects through without any environmental.
But so we talked about this on the show on Friday. Sherry and I didn't know because Evie's defense seems to be, well, I can't do that even if I wanted to, because of, and I thought he had said UNDRIP, and we thought it was UNDRIP. But UNDRIP, as you were mentioning earlier in this show, isn't a legally binding, like it isn't a law, but DRIPA is, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry, DRIPA. Yeah.
The BC provincial law.
Mhm.
So I believe that there is an avenue if they try to push through something that should have received Indigenous consultation. I believe there's a legal avenue, and I don't believe that Bill 15 would trump it.
I think
But
that
I don't
the
know if I'm just
real
being naive and hopeful and optimistic.
I think
Eh.
the real problem with Bill 15 was that he did not consult the Indigenous population before it was
Absolutely.
written.
Absolutely.
Was written.
100%.
And that actually sticks
100%.
in, that's the thing that really poisoned the bill
Yeah.
from the get-go. So anything after that, he's not only got to make up the misstep and the
Yeah.
and the mistrust from that action. Now he's also got to work doubly hard to prove that he won't do it again. Now, as far as
100%.
as far as the
100% bad move. In my,
municipalities,
sorry, go ahead. I'm sorry.
So as far as the municipalities go, though, that aren't Indigenous led or whatever, I don't have a problem with them telling them that they're going to be building schools and hospitals in their municipalities. Because what we know about municipalities, especially some of them in British Columbia, is that the mayors are actually quite corrupt, and they're taking massive pay, and they're not putting through the projects that are needed for their communities. And look what's happening up in the north. One of the reasons why the north went so conservative is because they've been basically forgotten when it comes to infrastructure to support the populations that are moving up there. And when I think of infrastructure, I'm thinking schools, hospitals, clinics. I'm thinking, ambulance services, all of the things that you need to have a community operate. I don't have a problem with municipalities being overridden. I do have a problem with Indigenous peoples and Indigenous communities being overridden, because we are trying to we're trying to reconcile, right?
Yeah.
And so you have to come to the table in good faith for reconciliation. And I will fully admit that EB screwed up by not consulting Indigenous people before they wrote the bill and presented in the legislation.
I think once Mark Carney assembles all the provincial leaders and tells them to smarten up, I think things are going to change, because you're absolutely right. BC, Nova Scotia, Alberta has not typically consulted First Nations. And if we're going to move at speeds that we have to, we have to have Indigenous people on board.
Right. And I'm gonna say something to Miss Lotus and Polly and Christy. I'm not surprised. This has been time proven, time and time again, that politicians will say something, but not follow through and say, well, it's not against my obligation. It's against I can't do that. I've heard that time and time again my entire life. Whether
Oh, I'm not out
it
here
was
saying that politicians, if anybody
no, no,
thinks
no,
that
no, no,
I
no,
have
no,
ever
no.
suggested that politicians are trustworthy or that
Oh
we
God,
should believe
no, no,
everything
no,
that
no, no,
politicians, I have
no,
been misunderstood. I'm not,
no,
that's not what
no,
I'm about.
no attacking, not attacking you, Chrissy. You know I love you. It's no
Oh,
attack.
I
I'm
love you
just saying,
too.
like,
I wanted to make sure if anybody else was getting that from me to
oh yeah,
correct that
no,
because it's
I
not what I
never trust a
believe.
politician as
Far
far as I
from
can
it.
throw them.
Mo
I
wants
Nothing.
start
to
most
say
of my
something.
videos by saying bullshit. I'm just
Mo,
saying.
Mo's got her hand up. Mo's got her hand up.
I would just like to read a quote from Terry Teague, and he is the chief of the BC Assembly of First Nations.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot overstate the serious setback and harm these actions have on the years of hard work and integrity of DRIPA and the future of reconciliation, stated Terry Teague, regional chief of the BC Assembly of First Nations. Nothing short of repeal would be appreciated or serious amendments need to be made.
Yeah.
So that's what the chiefs are asking for. And I'm going to come at this from a anti-violence perspective.
Mm.
I went through the act, and what I'm concerned about, they're pushing through these permits. There's going to be man camps, and we know wherever there's a man camp, more and more of our people go missing.
Mm.
So I will be advocating to the federal and provincial governments that when they put these projects through, they better be prepared to give money so we can do the preventive work from allowing our people to go missing and murdered and abused.
absolutely.
There's some good news. And I think it was the throne speech. They did say that we are going to increase funding and increase the RCMP throughout Canada. So that might help a little bit because you're absolutely right. Murdered and missing Indigenous women is something that needs to be addressed. And
No,
I think,
absolutely.
if I may, when usually the conversation around missing and murdered Indigenous women is more about the awareness, right? About how when a white woman goes missing, the awareness is not hard to achieve, whereas Indigenous women are not getting the same awareness in society. I think awareness more specifically should also be about prevention, like Mo was talking about. Recognize which areas are more likely to be vulnerable, like the man camps that she's talking about, and make more of a preventative measure instead of just focusing on making sure the reaction is loud enough.
Right.
I think white people have to understand that any misstep on our side through reconciliation is going to be met with more seriousness had we not had all of the disastrous and horrible history settlers to Indigenous people on Turtle Island, that if we do misstep, even if we have the best of intentions, we have to be extremely careful because, like Mo just read, it can set us back. It can set reconciliation and the good faith of reconciliation back horribly, just from not consulting on a bill that they wanted to pass, right? And you know, I think that, you know, Evie's got to own this one, in that he should have paused and he should have taken it to the Indigenous people and said, okay, what don't you like? What do you like? How would you like this framed? And then rewrote it with consultation of the Indigenous people of BC before it was taken to the legislature.
May I would really like to criticize Evie on this too, not just for the failure of meeting with people or getting the consultation that we're all agreeing that he should have gotten, but it's not just, for me, it's not just about that. It's about now you have this distraction where when we have to, Calvin's mentioned it several times in this show, how quickly we need to be moving. This was an unforced error. in my opinion. I don't believe he's going to be able to go forward without having to agree. I don't think Carney's going to let that happen personally. That's not what I'm getting from Carney's message. So if Eby thinks he can move forward without having Indigenous people on his side, I think number one, he's naive. Number two, by failing to recognize that when he's trying to push this bill through, he knew it was an issue. It's not like he's surprised by the feedback. He shouldn't be, because none of the rest of us are. We knew that this would be the feedback from that community. So why are you creating this unnecessary confrontation? In my opinion, it's unnecessary. You should have consulted with them to start with. And now that it is an issue, you should apologize and take steps to rectify it immediately, because the longer you don't, the longer it is going to distract from the projects that need to move forward at, like Calvin said, at a speed that needs to be faster than having to take a step back to deal with something that shouldn't have to be dealt with, because you should have consulted with them in the first place, in my opinion. Go let me work for Eby. I'll make sure he does it.
I
See,
think Mo
what-
wanted to say something before Christy jumped in.
Oh, sorry. And then my
It's
rant
okay.
took over. My apologies.
It's okay. We have an example when government didn't consult with Indigenous people, and that is here in Victoria, District 61 School Board. They were bringing in a safety plan to put officers back in our school. They blamed the Indigenous and BIPOC community for scrapping this plan, but no consultations were done. So the school board kept running this around, and finally they dissolved the school board. We have a trustee now because our voices were not heard. And chiefs of the Esquimalt and the Sanji Nation were very vocal about it. So
Mhm.
that's just another example in this province right now of what's happening to our voices.
Mm-hmm. But I will say, unfortunately, sorry, Calvin, just a second. I'll be really quick. I would say though that it's unfortunate that this is what we're talking about now, when there has been some really good progress made in this province towards truth and reconciliation, and we can't forget that those things also have happened. It's absolutely, we should be criticizing, but we also should acknowledge that it's not like this government hasn't done anything for Indigenous communities in British Columbia, or
That's why I think it's worse.
hasn't tried to further reconciliation in the province. Yes, this is a problem. Yes, we need to be critical of this, but it doesn't mean that it's the same as Alberta or Nova Scotia.
I understand, and I don't disagree with that, but in my opinion, and it could be just how hard I am on people, but in my opinion, I think that makes it worse. I think that makes the distrust even stronger, because if you expect somebody to let you down like this, your distrust doesn't move that much. You already didn't trust them, right? I think it makes it worse. That anyways.
For generations, treaties, consultation hasn't taken place. Provincial governments and the federal governments have always done things the way they wanted to. And we are seeing the remnants of that in Alberta, Nova Scotia, and BC. Whatever is going to happen when Mark Carney meets with the premiers, I think it's going to change the way things are run right now. Because basically, just like in the King's speech, all of us, all multicultural aspect and Indigenous people, and we all have to come together. So I think the remnants of the old way of doing things, of pushing things through, is going to stop. I personally believe that this government is going to put consultation and First Nations at the forefront, because we have to be the driving force and we have to be the partners, because we are the caretakers of this land. And because we are caretakers of this land, we have to be front and right up front with the decision-making process. And I think I think he recognizes that, because there's nothing that would slow up a project more than Indigenous people lawyering up and going to the Supreme Court. And I don't think Mark Carney wants that.
I think that all politicians, in my perfect world, would at this time especially would recognize the importance of everybody being on the same page and would be more inclusive of who's reading the pages.
So let's talk about informed consent. Informed consent must be competent to make voluntary decisions about the issues, disclosure and education about the known risks, benefits, and alternative options. Informed consent carries an ethical and legal obligation implicit in providing informed consent is an assessment of the maker's understanding, rendering an actual recommendation and documentation of the process. Thoughts? Comments?
Say that again. I didn't quite hear it, Mo.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay.
I was just
Do
moving around.
you want me to read it again?
Informed consent is what again?
Informed consent must be competent to make a voluntary decision about the issues, disclosure and education about the known risks, benefits, and alternative options. Informed consent carries both ethical and legal obligations. Implicit in providing informed consent is an assessment of the decision maker's understanding, rendering an actual recommendation and documentation of the process.
I would say yeah. Informed consent is a must when doing these projects because we all need to know that we all agree that there can be risks, there can be complications. But if you're not giving the people that are the caretakers of the land that conformed informed consent, you're not doing your job properly. That's my problem. Is I understand informed consent now, so thank you. But is informed consent going to be actually taken seriously by provincial and federal leaders? That's what I want to know.
One thing that I wonder how it's going to take place, because First Nations, they're a diverse group. And so even within, let's just take Nova Scotia for an example, we have 13 chiefs. And within those 13 chiefs, you have 13 different communities with a population of 2,500 to about 4,000 each. So how do you have consultation to give informed information in order to do informed consent? That would be a massive undertaking.
Well, that's just making sure that everybody has the information, is it not? And everybody
Absolutely.
has access to.
Informed,
Sorry, please go ahead.
Informed consent to me would be after consultation, you get to make that decision, and you're consenting based on you being legally informed, because you can't consent to anything without being informed properly.
I understand. So are you suggesting that the informed requires, well, that's what the consent is. You're consenting you're consenting after you're informed, right?
No, no, you're, I guess, we're missing. I have a difficult time gathering my thoughts today. What I mean is
I hope I'm not saying it
consultation
wrong.
and given informed consent is going to be a massive undertaking in each province, because like I said, I was explaining, we have 13 different communities, and each community has a large population, and each individual person has their treaty rights invested in this. Like, if my chief was to negotiate something on my behalf, I do not give my informed consent. I don't give my consent for him to negotiate treaties. So that's another aspect we're going to have to look at. Each individual one of us are treaty holders. So what streamlined process
I think sorry, please go ahead.
So what streamlined process can we are they going to develop where each individual community member gives their consent to the chief, and therefore, and then gives consent to the government? You know what I mean?
So, like, do you want a referendum for everything that's going forward so that everybody can receive the same information as those consenting to it?
That's probably what's going to happen. It'll be the easiest, most streamlined, most democratic process.
So I've heard that suggestion from a lot of conservatives. Actually, almost all of them would like to see that. They would like to see absolutely every bill that's going forward for everybody to be able to vote on it. Personally, I don't believe that that's feasible. I think that, like, it's so expensive. Sorry, go ahead.
I think what Calvin's talking about is for Indigenous people, like the Indigenous communities need to be able to have a vote to give their vote to their chief. So their chief can go to the federal government so that it can be so it can be sovereign nation to sovereign nation.
I understand. But I'm asking on how often, like, do you want to be, like, is it for absolutely everything that the chiefs are going to consent to on your behalf? Or is it like a voting thing, like they have your trust, like you trust them to consent on your behalf, kind of in the same way like when I made the conservative comparison?
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, really,
that's the same thing that I'm saying, that there's got to be a process that's going to have to be developed and explain that to each individual community member and on First Nations.
I know it looks over. Sorry.
I don't know what that process will be, but there has to be something developed, or individual community members within each individual community is going to raise hell. I'm just saying that ahead of time.
Really, when you look at it, you might think, okay, 13 chiefs. We have several chiefs here, but what it means is we're not looking at going to all the chiefs. Wherever that project is taking place, on that nation will be the ones that are doing the consultations. And a lot of times what should happen is whoever is going to be the consultant of the projects that are going ahead, they should have a meeting with that particular nation to inform them, and then everybody kind of is on the same page. We're not saying, or I'm not saying that, you have to grab all the chiefs. It should only be the chief. It's our decision as Indigenous people in that nation with the chief. But unfortunately, we do know that we have chiefs in council that are very corrupt, and they they will not consult with their own people.
No.
So
I think, honestly, I think that that's the problem that we all have in common, is that there's no group of people at all that you can point to where there's no corruption, where greed hasn't turned at least somebody. There isn't a single group of people.
Well,
I'm gonna lose my phone.
And that's exactly what's going to happen, though. Like that's a beautiful example. I'll give you an example. In my own community, they brought in the Nova Scotia Liquor Corporation, where there's alcohol sold on my reserve. Over 50% of my community don't condone this. They hate it. Then they also signed an agreement with the Nova Scotia Liquor Corporation preventing us from trading or selling any marijuana, which is basically a direct violation of our treaty rights. But our chief signed on to it. And so this is what I mean. There's going to be community members in each individual community raising hell if there isn't some kind of process to deal with the individual within the community with their informed consent.
Right, and this is why I say informed consent is good if you're going to get everybody collectively on the same page.
Yeah.
Yes, I think that's what Calvin is trying to maybe say. I don't want to speak for you, Calvin. I'm just going by what I hear.
No,
and
I agree. That's what I mean. Like, and there's a lot of corruption within chiefs. Like,
it's a person in power thing. It's not.
But it goes farther than that, Christy. It goes with the colonialistic system we have today, and it goes with you mesh them together. The colonialistic system has been corrupting a lot of people because they hand you money to basically shut you up, and that's
Yeah.
the problem.
And that's what's happened to a lot of the chiefs in Alberta.
Yeah, a lot of them are corrupt.
Mo, are there
And
any more? Sorry. Just wondering if there's any more slides that you would like me to show.
No.
the puppy disagrees.
Who's that? Is that Maisie?
So with that, we're running a little bit over our time limit. If we can go around and just have some final thoughts that you want to leave everybody with today, and we'll start with Smarshy.
Rescue me out of Alberta, please. I'm just joking. I love you all. I want you guys to understand that non-Indigenous, Indigenous people need to work together to make this country stronger. And we are fighting for our sovereignty still to this day because America's gone crazy and they have no idea what they're doing. And they just know that we have a threat against our country and we need to stand together, non-Indigenous and Indigenous people, and work together to make this country great again, or make this country what it could be, what it used to be before all this colonialism and stuff came into play, because I believe we can get to flourish. I believe we can make this country better than it ever has been.
Miss Lotus Lady.
Well, I think that I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful. Let's put it that way. I'm hopeful. I see progress. It may not be at breakneck speed, but I do see progress. The fact that Carney handed the bill over to Indigenous for consultation before he showed it to any other stakeholders was a very positive step forward, I thought, and shows that he doesn't just talk the talk, he walks the walk. And that, I think, will trickle down throughout the country and disseminate throughout the country. And I feel very honored to be included on the panel. I don't know if I was able to really add anything in of any value. I do know that I do need to learn more about the intricacies of Indigenous law and how Indigenous communities operate, like with your chief system and stuff, because I don't understand it. And I think that us all working together at the grassroots is what's going to heal the country. And that's why I think spaces like this are very powerful and very necessary for us to all come together to listen and learn and discuss and hopefully find a path forward. So thank you for including me today.
You're most welcome, and we appreciate you contributing to the podcast. I have always said the only way that we are going to have our voices grow and make this country great is if we work together. So thank you for joining me. Maple, do you have a final thought?
Sorry, it takes me a minute to unmute. I'm also very thankful to be a part of these podcasts here. I'm very thankful that you are with Maple Minds, and I'm learning a lot. I'm same as MS Lotus Lady. I have no idea of the intricacies of the chiefs and I didn't even know that the Indian Act didn't include. I learned something new today. Like, I didn't know that they didn't include Métis and
Inuit.
thank you.
Inuit.
Yeah,
I
my
got
memory. Thanks. So yeah, I learned something new, and I think we need to do more of these. I know we've gone a bit over, but it's a very important, very, very important topic. And it's really important that we do work together. And I am so honored to be a part of this. So honored. Thank you for trusting me.
I love you, my sis. And Christy.
Okay, I have a few thoughts. One of my thoughts is David Eby needs to see this and hire me so that I can clue him in and get him to just do things right the first time and save some time. anyways, I would also like to thank you guys for including me, and thank you very much for letting me ask my questions. I've been around the Indigenous community since my early 20s. Since I was a teenager. My stepmom was Indigenous, and I worked on a reservation for 10 years. So I'm a little bit familiar, but I think what I get most out of asking you guys, and because we never talked about like UNDRIP, and we never talked about how politics affects, we talked about like social issues and stuff, and more everyday how people who don't talk about politics talk to each other. But this really gives me a better perspective on how politics affects other communities. And I have to tell you, I have learned more from this app than I have in like my other 50 years of living. I learned so much on here, and it's because you guys let me ask questions. And if I ever cross the line with my ignorant questions, because that's why that's where my questions are coming from. They're coming from a place of ignorance of this has been my life experience. And just because I was around other people with Indigenous life experiences doesn't mean I know what it's like, just means I'm more familiar with some of the language, but it doesn't mean that I know what it's like, and I get to learn more of that here. So thank
I
you.
don't see it as ignorance. I see it as you just wanting to learn and knowing better and doing better.
I
So
do
thank
want to
you.
learn.
Yeah.
We don't
And
love
I
everyone that's
agree
here.
that it takes all of us, and I believe strongly that education is the best, our best chance of success. And I'm not talking about just in schools. This is education. And encouraging people when you're part of this to take what you've learned and to talk to other people who also don't know about this kind of stuff. I think that's really important too.
You know,
Calvin.
I love that. It reminds me of growing up with this quote. I forgot who told me this. I was young. It's like the more you know, the more you know you don't know. And the
Yeah,
more
that's
you know you
Socrates.
don't know. Oh, that's Socrates. The more you
It is.
want to know.
I
Yeah.
think he phrased it differently, but I think basically the basic idea came from a
Yeah.
Socrates quote. But it's totally true. The more
Yeah.
you learn, the more you realize how much you don't know.
And I
right?
think
And we
and it's
continue to learn every day.
yeah, and it's a vicious cycle, right? The more we know we don't know, the more we want to know. Anyways, I'm very thankful for somebody wanting to listen to my BS.
Oh, Calvin,
It's
you
not
know you're
BS. Hey,
important.
Calvin, if it was BS, you would have heard me say it by
Uh,
now. Trust me, I don't hold back.
I
I love what you have to offer to us. Thank you.
I am an oddball in my own community because I love politics and I love Indigenous issues. But the community I grow up with and live in is such a colonialistic, corrupt electoral system that I've disagree with it and speak out against it. And so nobody really listens to me around here, but I have insights from being a politician myself and studying history. So I'm just glad to be part of the team and be able to offer my 2 cents with it. I think moving into the future with this new government, I think the way that things have been done historically is about to change. And historically, Canada has been pretty consistent. We've always depended on the United States and integrating ourselves with them. Like Mark Carney said, that is over. I think we are going to become the first and foremost leader in the free world. And I put a lot of faith into Mark Carney. I think he's the right man to the job. I think there's a reason why they brought him in. He's a crisis manager, and we are in a time of crisis. And the way things have been done isn't going to be the same, isn't going to fly anymore. And I look forward to what he has in store.
My final thoughts on what we discussed today is I'm hopeful, but I'm cautiously optimistic as well. We will be watching our politicians closely and holding their feet to the fire, as well as watching what our communities are doing and seeing how we can support them. Calvin and the rest of the panel, how would you feel about discussing Indigenous politics, how councils are elected, how chiefs are elected
I'd love
for our
that.
next?
I'd love to learn. As I'm growing, I'd love to learn.
Don't get me started. I could go on for days and days and days on just exactly that.
That's a yes then, my brother.
I think it
That's
would
a
be
yes,
perfect.
brother.
It's Indigenous History Month.
It is.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
I
Yep.
know the ins and out of First Nation. I took training, right? When I was a politician, I took training with INAC to how governments are formed, how to run a First Nation government, what powers and legislations, what powers chief and council has, what they can and can't do. I know the intricate system of how the band umbrella works. I know our financial controllers and their responsibilities. I know what agencies within the band aren't covered by the federal funding, so they're basically autonomous and little islands on themselves. That's where the corruption takes place.
Exactly.
May I also just since we're talking about Indigenous and we're talking about politicians, may I express my admiration for Mr. Wob Canoe? Oh my gosh.
Oh my God.
Absolutely. That's
That
going to be our
man.
next prime.
Canoe.
That's going to
I
be our
think
next prime
Wob Canoe is
minister.
just such a fantastic example of what we want our politicians to be. And the fact that he's Indigenous is
Chef's kiss.
it is.
I
I
saw
get
the
goosebumps when he puts on his regalia and he does the dancing, and I see the videos of the Wob dancing. You don't understand the chicken skin I get of the
the chicken
goosebumps.
skin.
Like, I love it.
He's not hard on
But
the eyes.
he's
He's not
not.
hard on the eyes. He is not.
And not
Oh,
to
And I
and
mention
love that
that
he's always smiling.
I
You know what?
did see a clip.
When we see clips of this premier's meeting that's going to happen, I guarantee you it's going to go like normal face, normal face, normal face, Wob, big smile, normal face, normal face. You know what I mean? Guys
Yeah.
always smiling. I love it.
He's
See,
very expressive.
when I saw him yell at the reporter, but not like yell at her
He
in
didn't
a
yell
way.
though. He was like
He did it
classy,
diplomatic. He was so demure and classy and everything. It was like,
classy.
oh my God, that's what we need in politicians today.
I look forward to the next topic because I even did videos on how to change governments, because we all know First Nation politics. Once you've got a certain quorum of politicians in there, they never get out. They never get unelected. So I even did instructional videos on how to do that. So I look forward to that.
Also, as we're talking about politics in the next show, we can also talk about how we get our people in the inside of House of Commons, in our provinces, in our municipalities, in our school boards. And with that, I just want to say thank you, everybody, for joining us. I leave you with much love and many blessings.
Good
Much
night.
love and many blessings.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Please remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We have now shows on Monday, Fridays, and Sundays. And thank
Good
you
night.
for your time. Thank you so much for being here. Good night,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Oh, go ahead.
Thank you.
Anytime.